What's going on, everyone? 73% of the S&P 500 closed up in the green today, and we already knew we were set for a wild week based off of what's going on in the Middle East and the upcoming important interest rate decision. But there's actually a lot more that's secretly going on right now behind the scenes than most people think. In today's video, we have some very interesting data showing a mass deployment of U.S. warplanes that just departed military bases in the U.S. and flew across the Atlantic heading towards Europe and the Middle East, and what that might be saying about what's to come. On top of that, we have a big interest rate decision coming up, as well as some great charts, data, and setups for tomorrow. Tom, let's not waste any time and get right to it.
Yeah, the SPY actually made a really nice recovery today, almost closing up 1%, as we can see in the bottom right-hand side of the screen here. But Mike, whenever I'm looking at the SPY, I'm like, wow, this is kind of a head scratcher. The SPY just had this nice move this morning back above $600 in pre-market, and then we had that nice rip at open. And I'm sure a lot of people were going into today looking at the market and saying like, okay, with everything going on between Israel and Iran, I was expecting a lot of fear to come in, right? And whenever we saw the market start to really rip back above $600 today and even break above some key resistances like 602, we started to see a lot of good buying pressure come in. I noticed crude oil actually fell down a little bit today as well after gapping up last night on the futures, so that's definitely going to be on watch with this whole situation. But Mike, everybody's just really looking at the market right now and they're like, okay, is this situation with Israel and Iran going to get worse, or is this going to get better anytime soon? And it doesn't seem like anything's going to be getting better in the short term. Iran's warning that they're preparing their largest and most intense missile attack in history on Israel. That's going to be a pretty big thing. They've been striking each other now for a few days, and if that's their largest one ever, you would think it would be a pretty brutal situation.
And unfortunately, it looks like the U.S. is getting a little bit more involved than most people would like to think. We just actually redeployed one of our aircraft carriers, the USS Nimitz, to the Middle East, which is, saying something by itself. But there was also a lot of data that just came out that tracks flights in the U.S. And basically on Sunday, just like a barrage of U.S. Air Force planes flew across the Atlantic, and something like this has been marked as very unusual by many people who are more familiar with how U.S. military planes tend to move, and I guess you could say migrate. But basically, it looks like we're sending over a bunch of aerial refueling tankers to Europe and the Middle East. So again, it's not saying anything yet, but these actions definitely are unusual, and I hate to see this happening. At the same time, it looks like the situation in the Middle East is only getting worse and worse. We saw the market sell off a bit on Friday, and if we continue to see this situation escalate, I think there definitely can be some implications not only for the market, but also, of course, volatility, which, at least from a trader's perspective, would be certainly game-changing.
Definitely. Looking at the VIX right now, Mike, the VIX, the volatility index itself, has been coming up a little bit. It's been basing down here around 1650, and we are starting to see it pop up a little bit. I know today it moved down 8% after that crazy move on Friday, but in my opinion, this situation is just now starting to unfold, and we're starting to see things escalate a little bit more, especially with Iran pushing their largest and most intense missile attack on Israel ever. I mean, that's a pretty big statement right there, and I really do think, Mike, that us sending these warplanes and refueling tankers over there is a big sign showing that we might be going for more of a, some airstrikes, or, obviously getting involved in some type of way in this situation. And it definitely is going to spark a lot of fear. I know in the short term, a lot of people were like, well, what's going on with gold? If this is going to spark so much fear, why is gold down 1.4% today? Again, this is a bit of a head scratcher in my opinion. But what I noticed is that whenever we saw gold and oil pull back, they really only pulled back to the areas that they gapped up at previously. So I don't think that today's too groundbreaking as far as the pullback is concerned on gold and oil. I do expect there to be a lot more volatility coming in to these sectors.
Yeah, and when you look at historical data, like we can see on the screen right here, where you basically see what happened in the past with like major events, especially war-related ones, there definitely is a significant uptick in volatility and just crazy moves in both directions. And one thing that really stood out to me with this data is that like in a 1 month like perspective, we actually see average negative returns, which says a lot, of course, because the returns are negative. But when you compare almost any data, it's like any historical data, it almost always has like a positive skew, just generally speaking, because the market rises a lot more than it falls. But we could see like when we have important situations, we actually saw the market fall 55% of the time 1 month later, and the average drop was like 1.1%. And when you compare that just like the default stats for the market, it normally rises 60% of the time and has average returns of 0.7%. So honestly, this data is pretty meaningful, and situations like this definitely do have a big impact, certainly more than most people think.
Yeah, and there are times like where like you will see situations like, let's say like where the Iraq war started, right? And then like 1 month later there is actually a positive move in the market. That's not always going to be like where we have like a huge drop or something of that nature, but I do think that right now, given everything going on, I am kind of leaning that way, and the data definitely does support this here, Mike. And I know that like whenever traders are looking at the SPY even right now, everybody's also worried because we're at huge resistance. We're not quite to all-time highs yet, and we're really running into this major 610 to like 613 buy wall where that all-time high is. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching that over the next few days. And like, let's say that this situation intensifies. I mean, that sounds like an awfully good place to take profits from the bottom of this dip, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And what I think like the most exciting thing is, specifically from a trading perspective, is the uptick in volatility that we should see like no matter what. Again, if this situation intensifies, I wouldn't be surprised to see more like general selling and fear spread. But if we see this VIX pop up again, and on Friday it had like a very good move, we'll just see like bigger swings in the market, which is something that like really benefits traders, because not only do we just see bigger moves, which helps, but also when the VIX is moving up, that means options premiums are just flying high, and it's just that much easier for traders out there to make money. So that is one thing that's pretty excited to look forward to. And then in like a more industry by industry sense, of course, look at oil and energy. Ticker symbol USO has been one of the most popular tickers for this situation. It pulled back a little bit over the past few days or so, but it's definitely still in play. And of course, GLD and SLV are close on watch as well. But Tom, talking a little bit more, let's say like the market overall, it has been crushing it lately. Like you said, the market is basically at all-time highs, and I saw some very interesting data right here that basically shows what the S&P 500 normally does after a near bear market low, which would be defined as like a decline between like 18.5% and 19.99%, which is what we saw this time around. And we could see all the way to the left, 2025 is that red line on the chart, and it has actually been the best performing recovery for the first 45 days throughout all of the data here, which goes all the way back to 1945. So that's pretty awesome. And if you could see, like generally speaking, the market does tend to have like a pretty strong like rest of the year and next few months, given this data.
Yeah, definitely. And it does look like that there might be like some periods of slowdown here, but at the end of the day, it does continue higher for the most part. Of course, there are some instances, like let's say where we get to month like 3 and 4, like the 2002 line does dip down quite a bit. I do think that there could be some, outliers on any specific year. But looking at the data, it's really good to see that, especially like the 1 month and 3 month later categories are pretty much up in the green. And we do get some pretty good average returns over those times. I know that like on the 1 month, 1.7 isn't like the greatest ever, but it's definitely pretty decent considering everything, right? Whenever you're in a near bear market. So we'll take it. But Mike, I think that this data is awesome. It definitely helps support, like, let's say a continuation to the upside, right? One thing that I am worried about though is that since we're at like, let's say the best move on this chart, will we come back to like normalization?
Yeah, and one thing that I think is very interesting is if you look at the lime green instance on this data, it was like the second best performing year at this time. And we could see that there was a little bit of a dip, nothing too crazy, but a little bit of a slowdown exactly where you circled. But then it did continue to, trend higher throughout the rest of the year. And I think a dip is expected. And I think this can actually end up working together like really well this time around, because like we have a lot of historical data showing a lot of bullishness in a broader sense. But at the same time, there are a handful of like short-term things that definitely, open the door for a potential pullback. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing either, because those who have missed, let's say, like some decent dip buy opportunities over these past few weeks and months might have new opportunities come up, not only for like medium to longer term holds, but also like some nice like short term potentially bearish opportunities as well. So I think a pullback should come pretty soon, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, me either. And like as I look at the SPY, I'm like, okay, like where could we actually like realistically pull back to? I noticed before the SPY was channeling in this huge channel here between 575 and that all-time high of around like 610 to 613. I think that could be something that comes back into play where like maybe if we do get a large pullback, we start to channel in between here. Once again, we actually just bounced off that same exact 575 level just a few weeks ago before coming back up to test these recent highs. But Mike, it's a situation that we're going to have to let play out and unfold, obviously. And of course, make smart trading decisions in the short term. Do not be a bag holder. If we do see this situation develop, do not get caught just bag holding calls and hoping for all-time highs.
Exactly. But shifting topics a little bit, one stock we definitely have to cover today is AMD. This stock led the market, in my opinion, as it popped up by 9%. It crushed it right out of the gate. And Tom, they had some pretty exciting news here, and there has been a ton of short-term opportunity with this one. So what is going on?
Yeah, that was a great run today. Looking at this situation a little bit closer here, one thing that really affected this run today is Piper Sandler came out and they actually upgraded their price target on AMD to $140 from $125. Now that's pretty awesome. They did maintain them at their overweight rating, but I thought that price target adjustment there was really nice to see. Now, one thing that really kicked it off today is that they noted that AMD and Amazon are in a pretty big relationship right now, and they actually said that there's been a lot of speculation within the investor community that a deal or partnership between Amazon and AMD could be announced soon. Now, this is obviously, like I said, full speculation here within the investor community, as they say, but that is a lot of the reason and what a lot of people were attributing this overall run with AMD to today. And it makes sense because, look, if AWS needs to expand, what better than AMD to get that deal? And beating out NVIDIA, by the way, that's a pretty big feat.
Yeah, that's huge news on multiple different fronts. Of course, like AMD potentially beating out NVIDIA is great as it is. And like what better potential partner can you ask for than Amazon? Like they have a ton of demand with AWS. And like another thing too is even if this deal is just made up and like these rumors are just rumors, it doesn't necessarily matter for the stock. Like if everyone is getting hyped up about this, people are going to bid up the shares, buy call options, talk about it in a bullish way, and all of these effects definitely have a bullish impact on AMD. AMD is a company I definitely like for the long term, still at this level, and it's definitely great to see awesome moves like this. I loved today's price action, and one of like my favorite things with AMD is when it moves, it seriously has the potential to trend very strongly. If we go to an intraday chart, you can see that the uptrend today was, I would say, quite literally a straight line up. And AMD is like known for like constant like momentum driven movement, so I think it's definitely still in play for tomorrow. It would be great if we can break above that like 128 resistance and continue to put more pressure on highs. Also, we are coming off of that mega Oracle breakout from last week where Oracle had a great move on Thursday, and then it continued through with that on Friday. So we do have like a decent breakout environment going on. We'll see if AMD can continue this short-term streak, but there's no way we couldn't bring it up, especially with this type of movement.
Yeah, and you never know. Like, we could end up waking up tomorrow and then, like, Iran attacked Israel and something crazy happened and every stock is down, and that could end up affecting something like AMD. But I think it's definitely in play in the short term, Mike. Like you said, it's up 8.81% today. And one thing, like, for the longer term, whenever I zoom out on the AMD chart, I really love the potential for this uptrend. We can see that the last time AMD had a major pullback, they pulled back right around 66%. Well, can you guess how much their current pullback was to the low? Well, you guessed it, right at 66%. So pretty similar pullback there. And the last time that we actually did see AMD pull back that much and then come up off of the lows, it rose a nice 316%. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to go up 316% from this point, but I do think that looking at like a potential dip buy with AMD for like even a longer term position down here could be pretty smart. And like, let's say that, on the way up, there are some dips mixed in, could be a good buying opportunity. But very good news here for them. And it's just good to see Amazon, I should say, and AWS using AMD's chips, or at least the rumor there, right? I can't wait for this announcement, though. Hopefully it comes sooner rather than later.
Definitely. So keep a very close eye on AMD going forward. And then, Tom, it is FOMC week. So let's jump right into that. So on Wednesday is when we will have the big man, Jerome Powell, give his interest rate decision, as well as his press conference 30 minutes later. The interest rate decision is at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and then the press conference is at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is important. He's expected to keep rates the same this meeting, but what's more important than that is what he says and what he is seeing with the economy right now. If he says things related to how inflation is coming in better than expected and that we might cut rates sooner rather than later, the market might really like that, and stocks can do very well. At the same time, if Powell comes out and says, we still haven't seen the full effects from inflation, now we have the risk of rising energy prices with the Middle East, plus just like general uncertainty, and because of that, we're a little bit more hesitant to cut rates, then the market's not going to like that at all. So what Powell says is going to be very important, and this is going to happen at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, and we're actually going to be getting a Federal Reserve dot plot coming out as well, which might also give us some good insights into what they're doing in the future with rate cuts. And for tomorrow, 1 hour before the market opens, we do actually have retail sales coming out, and I did notice that the consensus and forecast are in the negatives pretty low compared to that last reading. So I'm pretty curious to see how that ends up affecting things tomorrow morning. And then, Mike, I know the earnings calendar is pretty dead for this week. Tomorrow, we do have a couple like JBL and a couple smaller stocks like XAir in after hours. For the most part, though, pretty dead week on the earnings. I will say Aora Cannabis with the MJ stocks will be kind of interesting.
Should be interesting, and you'll notice how there are no earnings on Thursday. Don't forget the market will be closed on Thursday for Juneteenth, so keep that in mind as well. And besides that, Tom, I think we are golden for some SPY levels and analysis. So jumping over to the SPY charts, what are you seeing for tomorrow? What should we pay attention to?
In the short term, the SPY, it did have a really good rip today, and it tested a key resistance from last Thursday, right around 603.70 here to 604, and it really rejected back down today pretty hard. It got above there by a little bit and then came right back under that line and tested it. That's going to be a major resistance for tomorrow. If we could end up seeing a really good rip above that high of day from today, up around 604.50, I will become a little bit more bullish and look for a true 605 breakout and maybe even a move towards that recent peak up around like 606 to 606.30. I do think that recent peak up there around 606 to 606.30 is very important to watch, especially with the Israel and Iran conflict going on. If we end up like rejecting off of this and double topping, that could be a pretty big negative for the SPY in the ultra short term. I do love support though at $600. I was pretty surprised to see the SPY hold and get above there in pre-market. So that will definitely be a solid support coming up. Underneath of that, I do like 597.50 and then 594 to 595 down there as well.
Sounds good. And I will say, like, that 596 area is like a key level because this is like the point at which the market held up from the negative news from the initial strike on Iran from Israel. So I do think like breaking through that will definitely be like a key measurement of short-term sentiment. So definitely keep that in mind as well. The situation is developing every single minute, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better. And again, like we already covered, it looks like the U.S. is there. The actions definitely seem like we're getting a little bit more involved than most people would think. So we'll see what happens. Should be interesting. Besides that, let's jump right into some setups and predictions. A stock that's definitely on watch right now is BILI. There was a recent big money play with this one, and it's starting to do pretty well. It popped up by like 5.6% today, and it's definitely putting good pressure on recent highs. Looking at this stock, it is a Chinese stock, and it is continuing pretty well. I really like how quickly and strongly it recovered from Friday's sell-off, and it's definitely on my bullish radar, not only for tomorrow, but honestly over like the next like 2 weeks or so. I really like the brand new big money play. I like the short-term momentum, and I do like how it is getting closer to a breakout right around this like $21 and like 30-cent area. The more pressure it puts on recent highs, the better the setup will become.
What's pretty awesome that I like about it too is that it ripped above that $20 resistance in the short term, and it now confirmed it as support and is really starting to rip up there. I think that's a great sign, and overall I'll keep watching it as well, Mike, especially with the big money play here. With my first setup, I'm looking at Nano Nuclear Energy, ticker symbol NNE. It was up 13% today. We're starting to see a lot of these growth stocks start to pop off. I noticed that the nuclear stocks today did very well in general, not just NNE, but even others like SMR, Oklo, and many more. But with NNE in the short term, they are approaching this pretty big resistance right around like $37. And if they can break out above that high of day from today, I would definitely think that they could push that resistance and even break it. So if we see like a good $37 push tomorrow, keep watching it. Nano Nuclear Energy to the upside. It's definitely in play, and I gotta say, like, when you zoom out on the daily chart with Nano Nuclear and just some of these crazy growth stocks lately, you definitely see some pretty crazy continuations.
Definitely, and 13.5% on the day is nothing to ignore, so good stuff there. Another ticker that is definitely on watch is UVXY, and it is to the upside. As we know, this ETF can definitely fly when the market gets out of control, and especially given the Israel-Iran situation, it definitely does bring in a good element of uncertainty and just like straight up craziness. And then plus when you sprinkle in the FOMC interest rate decision and press conference this week, it's not all that surprising that there can be some extra volatility. So UVXY is definitely on my bullish radar, but I cannot stress this enough. In order to be able to justify playing this to the upside, there has to be positive momentum. If the market is just flying up and UVXY is just like slowly trickling lower, it's not worth the risk. But during the times when there is real panic and people are selling off and rushing out of the market, UVXY has a lot of potential. So that's why it's on watch. But again, this is not something that you could just blindly jump into.
Yeah, definitely not, but those intraday moves can be pretty awesome like we saw last Friday, and I know a lot of people caught that one on the way up, and from the bottom to the top there, that was a nice 10% intraday move, which is pretty good there, and it was pretty straight up as well, considering how much selling pressure did come in. I know it was down today, but I'll definitely be watching it in the short term as well. CoreWeave ended up having a pretty good day today as well, up 7.68%. Pretty awesome growth stock in the short term. I'm watching a key resistance on them right around $160. We can see that they've been consolidating a little bit up here at the top of this channel, and I'm watching for another breakout to start to materialize. I did see on the Bookmap there was a lot of sellers stacked up around 158 to 160 though, and that's partly why I want to see such a clear break of this range. Is I want to see those sellers get wiped out. I know that this is a very crucial level for CoreWeave, but I do think that there's a good chance that it could continue on the daily. So if we see that 160 breakout, definitely watch it. Maybe even set an alert up there. That'd be a very good place to do it at.
Definitely. And shout out to Bookmap for the X-ray vision. 160 will definitely be close on watch. But besides that, Tom, how about we jump right into today's momentum plays? And with the first one, we have the metals company, ticker symbol TMC, to the upside.
This was up 28% today. If it can break out above $5.70 tomorrow, keep watching it up.
With the next one, we have Coinbase, ticker symbol COIN, to the upside.
Yeah, this was a pretty crazy move too. 7.77%. I don't know that it gets much luckier than that, but if they can break out above 264, watch them up.
And then with the last one, we have McDonald's, ticker symbol MCD, to the downside.
I know McDonald's might seem like a pretty boring stock, but their options can have some pretty wild moves sometimes. If it can break under 295.70, the recent low, then keep watching it to the downside.
Sounds good. So we have these three tickers on the radar for potential continuations tomorrow, if and only if they break through the levels listed. Definitely keep them close on watch. And like you said, these stocks definitely do have a good potential movement, not only with just like some of the stocks themselves, but also the options like you highlighted with McDonald's. But besides that, Tom, let's jump right into today's $481,000 big money trade, and we are looking at ticker symbol MATV. The trader here bought the $7.50 strike call options that expire on September 19th of 2025. This is technically a call debit spread where they also shorted the $12.50 strike call options. So the trader is risking around $481,000 to make $3.89 million. This stock has definitely been selling off quite a bit over the past few years, and it looks like the trader here is positioning themselves to profit off of a potential change of trend. The stock has already been recovering pretty well over the past month or so, and it held up pretty well today as it popped up by just under 4.5%. It's definitely at a very interesting point, and whenever you have a situation where a trader is risking, $481,000 to make $3.89 million, it definitely is very interesting, and I do like how this is more of like a dip buy style play given where we are currently at with like the broader market. And you'll also notice that ticker symbol MATV has like a very weak correlation to SPY, so that is always good. It kind of moves by itself.
Yeah, it'll have like a mind of its own. We don't necessarily need to worry about, let's say, what the SPY does here. And if the SPY does fall, heck, maybe that's a good thing for it, especially considering how much MATV has been falling down the past few years. Whenever I zoomed out on this one earlier today, Mike, I was pretty struck at how much this one has sold off. But note that whenever it sells off, it has these periods where it will go flying to the upside off of these dips. And that's one of the things I'm looking to happen here. It's not like I'm necessarily looking for like a full-blown recovery for 5 years or anything crazy like that, but a nice short-term move and recovery back up to like $8 to $10 would be pretty awesome here on the chart.
Definitely. So keep a close eye on this one going forward. It should be interesting. And then, Tom, we have to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Danny, in the StockedUp trading floor, who hit it out of the park. He had over $19,000 in profit today, so huge shout out to you, Danny. Keep up the great work going forward, and thank you so much for all of the kind words from this morning as well. We really appreciate it. You definitely deserve all the success you're getting, and huge shout out to you. Keep on rolling. If you guys are into short-term trading, definitely make sure to check out Bookmap if you haven't already. It's like the X-ray vision of the stock market, and StockedUp viewers do save quite a bit. So definitely check that out. A special offers icon will appear, and it'll show you exactly where all of the key buy and sell orders are stacked up, and these act as like major support and resistance levels. We have a very exciting market week ahead of us. Again, it is a short week as well. There should be a lot of good moves. Thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.